David Jordan is the private advisor to CEOs, specialising in creating results through strategic innovation. Welcome to this week's segment.
The CEO Innovation Blueprint tries to bring CEOs back in their thinking about not focusing on innovation but actually solving the customer's problem. It's ironic that in an age that we talk about that we're customer-centric, we're customer-focused, the customer is always right, that we actually don't think about solving the customer's problem when we're innovating. A very good example of this one I like to use is about the kettle. People don't want kettles, they want hot water. The business problem is that I want to make a cup of coffee, I need hot water, and the solution that I find today is that I use a kettle. Now, when companies are thinking about that we're solving the customer's problem, they're actually thinking is that the kettle is solving the customer's problem. They think that the customer wants a kettle. Their focus is around, we make kettles, we sell kettles, it's all about the kettle. And they forget about the customer. And it's a very good example of when you're innovating, step back and actually remember it's the customer, not the product that you're innovating. So the problem is that what's happened is that the customer was trying to solve the problem of how to make a cup of coffee. Somebody came along with a coffee pod machine, it boiled the water and made the coffee without the need for a kettle. So the problem is that the kettle became redundant. And the company that was focused on the product instead of solving the customer's problem actually started losing market share. So it's very important is to keep every meeting, every discussion, ask the question, how is it solving the customer's problem? One of the topics that we raise in CEO Innovation Blueprint is we say to you is you need to focus on what the customer wants. The challenge is that the customer doesn't always know what they want. A very good example was Henry Ford. Henry Ford said if I asked the customer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. They didn't know what a car was. If you actually look at what Steve Jobs did with Apple, did Steve Jobs go out to the customers and say, do you want an iPhone? They didn't know what an iPhone was. They didn't know if they needed an iPhone. What Steve Jobs actually focused on was to ask people, what are your problems with a mobile phone? It's the screen's too small, or can't read the writing, or it's difficult to use the keypad on the phone, or there are not enough right apps for it. What Steve Jobs was actually trying to do is not ask the customer what they wanted, but to understand deep down what the problems were that even maybe the customer didn't actually understand themselves. And so it's very important, not only when I'm saying is understand what the customer's problems are, but to actually really dig deep and understand the underlying problem, not just what you see on the surface. The other problem that we see today is a lot of discussion around big data. And a lot of companies are really focused on using big data to try and understand their customers. And there's a lot of benefit in it. I'm not trying to discount it. But one of the problems is that big data is recording what the customer does. So if you're a kettle company, you're watching the customer buying kettles. How is big data telling you that the customer can see a coffee pod machine that can do the job without need of a kettle? And it's very important to be careful with big data, to not be conned into following what the customer is doing because they don't know that there's something else that they could do instead. Another issue we talk about with CEO Innovation Blueprint is to really step back and understand what we're trying to solve for the customer. In banking, we have products like motor car loans or mortgage lending, business loans. But the thing is, the customer doesn't wake up in the morning and says, I want a loan. What they want is, I'd like a new car. The old car keeps breaking down. I need a new car, or I want to go into a new business, or the family's outgrown the home, we need a new house. So the problem that's been solved is that they want to do something, they want to buy a house. It's very difficult for a bank whose business for the last 100 years is about providing a home loan, to try and think away from the product. If the problem that we're solving is to enable people to get a home, is a home loan the only solution? And it's a very hard step for people to step away when they are so invested in this is our product, this is the service, all our computer systems are around that, to really step back and say, you know what, instead of lending them money to buy a home, why don't we lease them a home? Why don't we change our business model to make it easier? If we're sitting in an environment where the affordability of housing is such a problem, then shouldn't we step back and really rethink about what is our business about? Is it about lending, or is it helping a customer to get a new home? So when we talk, the CEO Innovation Blueprint is really trying to help the CEO to actually become the innovation leader of the business. Not to be the innovator, but to actually drive the organization to be creative, to get involved in continuous innovation, to challenge the status quo. So the role that the CEO has to be to challenge their executive, to challenge their staff, to get the executive to be challenging the status quo, to get the executives in overcoming fear of staff and overcoming their own fears. So to actually make the company successful is really important to really challenge the executive team to step outside of their normal boundaries. When you go in to look in business, it's very process oriented. The whole management structure from top to bottom is about the business process. I make widget X, I sell widget X, we manufacture widget X, we have production line issues, the computer system's failed, got to get the payroll right. It's all process driven, and it's really difficult to step out of that and think about strategic planning, strategic growth and innovation. It's very hard when you're worried about, we've got to get the power up and the system's failed, to be thinking about how do we solve this customer's problem. So it's really important to try and drive that executive to step back and refocus and re-energize on thinking about the customer and thinking about solving the customer's problems rather than the internal business problems. One of the examples that we try and talk in CEO Innovation Blueprint is how we've become so driven by the process, so driven by the policy that we've forgotten the customer. A very sad example and a very poor example of what happens when policies overtake common sense was a situation on Southwest Airlines recently. A woman was sitting there and gets a text from her husband just as the plane was about to take off. He said, "Sorry dear, I'm going to commit suicide." The woman's in absolute distress. The steward comes along and says, "Please ma'am, can you put your phone away?" Saying, "My husband's going to commit suicide. Can I contact the police to stop it?" "Sorry ma'am, you've got to put the phone away, we're about to take off." She asked, "Can we ask the pilot to contact the control tower to get the police to go to the house to stop the suicide?" "I'm sorry ma'am, not allowed to communicate with it." The policy stated that if a passenger is in danger, that the crew can talk to the pilot. The passenger wasn't in danger, the husband was in danger. So we have a very sad situation where a passenger is in tears the whole way through, gets home to find that her husband had committed suicide. We had all these policies in place that people followed for very valid reasons. We didn't solve the customer's problem, and it's a very glaring example of how we've become so focused on the policy that we forgot the customer.
To get your copy of David Jordan's book, The CEO Innovation Blueprint, go to his website, theceoblueprint.com.au.